affairs with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the
Weekly program on geoeconomics. A recent report by Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and the European Central Bank highlights how inflation might spiral out of control in a warming world. It examined various shared socio-economic pathways, those are called SSPs, and their potential to trigger inflation. The SSPs take into account the socio-economic factors like population, economic growth, education, urbanization, the rate of technological development and the like, while looking at climate change as well. So the trend of increasing commodity prices is likely to worsen by 2035 is what this report says. Global food inflation is expected to rise by nearly 2% year on year, and overall inflation of other commodities are likely to increase by 1% every year. So it will be worse in politically unstable countries, naturally, and also higher latitudes like the United States and Europe are going to see more seasonal or they're going to be more vulnerable to inflationary pressures during the summer months. Now, adaptation measures which have been in place for the past as well as future climate change, these have had very limited effect on inflationary pressure so far. That's what this report has found. So to discuss all this and the future impact of climate change on inflation, we have with us Professor Manoj Pant, who is an economist and former Vice Chancellor of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, and Srirangam is also an economist. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Professor Pant, the troublesome part of this report is that, the mitigation efforts that have taken place, they've not slowed down inflation, which has been caused by climate change. So the trend seems to be continuing since the mid-1990s. That's what this report says. So can we say that, we already have normalized this kind of inflation and we factored it in, and it's basically, it's par for the course?
See, first thing, remember, when a global issue comes, you've got to, for the moment, stop worrying about small micro issues like inflation going above 5% or 6% or 3%. Now, that you said about mitigation measures, we haven't taken any. Take India, for example. The target set some time back was by 2022, we would reach 40 gigawatts as alternative source. That is non-thermal, non-coal energy. We reached only 11. Now, look at the situation. In 2023, global temperatures are 1.2 almost above global average, highest ever. Your greenhouse gas emissions are now roughly about 5.38 gigatons. Mm-hmm. The question is, what is the impact? Now, way back in the 90s, the climate change scientists told us, you're going to get extreme temperatures. Those places didn't have rain will get rain and get extreme rain. Those places got a lot of heat will now get rain. Those that got a lot of rain will now get heat. And it's happening everywhere. You've seen the winters very cold.
Yes.
Summer's very cold and distinct. Look at Delhi. Look at India. We still haven't got to temperature. We don't know if we're going to high. Winter was disaster. So we are getting all the effects of climate change, which the scientists told us way back in the 90s, but we all dismissed it saying, no, nothing will happen. Now the point is, it is emergency situation as far as global climate change. And let me tell you, countries like India are going to face bigger problems than many of the other countries because it's going to affect countries which are tropical even more than the temperate countries. The seas will rise. Bangladesh is reputed to be underwater soon at this country. So you've got to sort of figure out mitigation. Well, I can tell you, for example.
Sure.
At the moment, we are all doing the only area which has taken serious mitigation measures. Forget the issue of inflation-led workout is Europe.
All right.
Europe has insisted that that environmental control is going to be dominant, and even in their trade negotiations.
Sure.
You heard of the CBAM controversy we've had. Now we can keep saying CBAM is disruptive, etc., but the fact remains that's the mitigation measure that they have. And carbon credit is something we've got to start thinking of. We wait too long.
Well,
we've got these guys telling us about.
So you've said that the mitigation measures actually haven't taken place. Not enough has been done. Mr. Srirangam, Central banks are doing their best to control inflation. We know that's been happening, some serious monetary tightening measures for the long time. But Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which is the big fund, they say that the problem is climate related, and so they don't think that inflation can be controlled this way, and money supply can't do much. What do you think?
No, you see, inflation has multiple causes. Climate change is yet to strike us in terms of its impact on inflation, except sporadically here and there. Inflation is caused by supply, demand, war, what have you. So, writing off the central banks and saying they are utterly incompetent to control inflation, money supply is no longer the reason for inflation. All that is, I don't know what to call it. It's not even rhetoric. It is completely misplaced.
Okay.
So the central bank, RBI issued certain guidelines asking the regulated entities to tell the RBI as to what is the financial risk that their lendings have as far as a climate connection is concerned. You could be vulnerable to flood. You could be vulnerable to heat waves, fires, what have you. And in the context, RBI would like to know. Also, considering the central bank's role regarding management of prices, stabilization of prices, so far we've been fed with the distinction between core and headline inflation. Now this headline inflation, of which food is a significant part, that has been relentlessly on the rise.
Yes.
Think of wheat in India, rice in India, vegetables in India. So to say that the MPC should peg itself to core, which is half of, not half, 3/4 of what headline is,
right.
that is completely out of the window now, because food inflation is here to stay. And who knows it more than India?
Professor Pant, food is likely to be impacted the most, as Mr. Srirangam has said. And already we've had examples of droughts, causing shortages. But the other concern is of food imports also getting hit, because, it's the priority of each country to feed themselves first. So, go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Can I give you a parallel?
Yeah, sure.
Now, Sriram, he said the right things, macroeconomics. Banks are doing what they're supposed to do, standard macroeconomic world. But we are not in a standard macroeconomic world. And I'm going to give you the parallel to what happened many years ago in the 30s, when we were all taking mitigation measures on trade. And we all protected trade, and all of us got into, fell into the soup. Then the whole world is in trouble. We're going to be the same problem here. When there's a macro problem, global macro problem, like climate change, which is going to have to be handled the same way as the global trade protection was handled, then you're going to have to think out of the box. I'll give an example. For so many years, we've known that we use extremely polluting coal. Japan uses even more coal in power than we do, yet they've been able to adjust by using cleaning methods in coal. Why have we not done it so far? Because people say power will become expensive. So we are not thinking ahead. We are still thinking in terms of these, what I would call these standard economic measures, like the State Bank of India raises interest rates when they think that there's inflation is going to take place, or they reduce money supply. But these are okay as long as these inflation, etc., are localized. But in climate change, we're talking about a global problem. We're not talking about a local problem. What are you going to do if the world has a shortage of wheat? Just have to economize on use of wheat or find alternative source of wheat. You can't get away from the fact that the global of climate change or global warming is what we would call a global good. It's what we call a global issue. It's not an issue of inflation. Now, I, of course, differ a bit on the inflation in India. When we say India is inflation, it is almost always led by food prices. And it's led by food prices because farmers only grow wheat and rice and sugarcane and go nothing else. Vegetable farming, which is the main source of inflation, is something which is done as a side business by almost all farmers.
Okay.
Now, that is something that could be handled at the micro thing, but then again, you'll get into this problem that who is hurt by, the minimum support price. Now, you've got to, first of all, most important, you've got to build in the consciousness in countries like India and other countries that just like we adjusted and we realized that you've got to adjust to global trade, you cannot use individual protection measures. Okay. Similarly, climate change will require action in the same way.
Indeed.
We're going to have a global climate change program, and then we'll work out who does who, etc. You
Indeed,
can't
but
do it individually.
but Mr. Srirangam, that global problem could also be affected because we know that the world is so interconnected that floods in one part affects, movement of goods and supplies elsewhere. Let's take, the example of Thailand in 2011. It had floods. It led to a shortage of auto parts. There was a hurricane in Puerto Rico that led to a shortage of some specialized medical equipment all over the world. So these are the kind of things. So the solution is what? I mean, Professor Pant was saying probably in the food area, it's more diversification, but it's more diversification all across, I guess.
Say about the globalization of the challenge, etc. I would like to give the example of chocolate. See, where is cocoa grown? West Africa and Indonesia. Both of them are subject to climate change and the extreme weather impact. The prices of cocoa have tripled in the last 1 year, doubled in the last 3 months. And in the process, what you have is, cascade. All the Nestle's and Mars that source their cocoa beans from Ivory Coast and Ghana and Indonesia, all of them are compelled to raise the prices. And in this whole bargain, there is a notion called disguised inflation, what you call shadow inflation. Mars chocolate, they have cut corners, they have reduced the quantum, but they have not hiked the price. So what do you have here? You are paying more for less, which is what you call disguised inflation. You have open inflation, you have disguised inflation. So what happens in Ghana and Ivory Coast in West Africa is telling on what is produced in Switzerland. And from there, all of us are chocoholics. We all love chocolate, but
Sure.
Can we seriously afford so much as we would like to? No.
Indeed.
This is the globalization, climate change, global macroeconomy. How do we get into global coordinated action here? We have to find out a way. Nothing happened in the UAE COP28. They didn't talk of inflation, how it emerges from the climate crisis. So we need to put our heads there also.
Absolutely. You raised an important point. Professor Pant, not only that, I mean, we took at fossil energy sources. They're already weaponized since the world has unequal distribution, as we all know. But renewables can be better harnessed. What are the emerging scenarios for energy, do you think, in the medium term?
Very good if you understand. If you look at the way we've changed, I mean, I don't have some of the numbers. Today, the cost of renewable energy is lower than the cost of non-renewable energy. In the last 20 years, between 2000 and 2022, there's been a dramatic decline in the cost of renewable energy like wind, air, etc., huge. Apart from that, conservation methods like getting out of fossil fuels, which, by the way, are history. You'll see 30 years from now, fossil fuels are history. Getting away from that has been working, but we're not doing it at a globalized level. We are seeing what is the USA doing. Europe is the only one doing very serious effort to combat it. India, we are not doing it seriously enough. We are still trying to go with the camp saying, look, we'll suffer too much. You have done this in the past. We won't do it now. Let's wait. It doesn't work like that. When you have a public bad like climate, which is bad for everyone, you cannot really work only at individual level. Now, Mr. Sriram talked about Africa. Agreed, Africa has a problem. But that does not mean Africa should ignore the issue of climate change and say we will do what we want in terms of production and we don't care about inflation. The question is, how does the world compensate them for not doing it? Okay. And that's how trade worked, right?
Right,
they built a capacity build-up fund globally in the WTO, and today developing countries in Africa and Latin America are given money out of the capacity build-up fund. India used to get ones too, to educate people. I mean, the advocacy, the urgency of the climate thing is still not lost. We get still lost in these, what I call, frankly, very, very micro debates as to what is happening to wheat. Now take India.
Sure.
How can you grow rice in Punjab? Tell me. The north has got no water.
Okay, fair enough.
Which fellow started growing rice in Punjab and perpetuating that? And the real rice growing bowls of Uttar Pradesh and all have disappeared. You cannot, you can't play with nature. Go to Northeast, you cannot beat nature, whatever you do.
Fair enough.
And climate change is one example, and the best example during climate change. You do what you want. You
Right.
cannot fight and win against nature, which is what I'm saying climate change is telling you to do. It's saying fall
Indeed.
back, think of measures. That's what
Okay.
I'm saying.
Mr. Srirangam, renewable energy and climate resilient infrastructure, these are part of the advised mitigation strategy. That's what most countries are doing. But, Professor Pant talked about climate fund and all that. What about the finance aspect? What about banks, finance, the economic shock absorbers? How well thought out are these strategies? After all, they are the ones who are, basically at the end of the day, paying the bills.
You know, the COP28 finalized the loss and damage fund. We are not eligible for that. That is for the least developed countries. And the Green Climate Fund of $100 billion, etc., is still to come up to that level. Something is trickling in, and we need to ramp up the pressure on the advanced countries to give us more money. But to come back to the renewable energy stuff, see, we are moving into the EVs, and that requires lithium. Lithium we don't have at all. Lithium is there in Latin America, South America. So we have Kabil tying up with Argentina to source some lithium from there. And this is what you call, in the context of greenflation. The topic happens to be climate change and global inflation, global warming and global inflation. So there is something called greenflation. Remember, we have to go for energy transition. In the transition, you seek to decarbonize. To decarbonize, you need to impose carbon tax. And that will tell in the form of inflation. See, bam, good or bad, is it a blessing or blessing in disguise or non-tariff barrier, whatever it is.
Right.
We're going to shell this, and that's going to be passed on to the consumers. And this is once again contributing to the greenflation. So, and add to that, I already talked about the lithium.
Yes.
The lithium part, and there's so much of demand for lithium and other similar minerals.
So they are also affected by climate change, Mr. Srirangam. Suppose there's some serious weather event in Latin America, then the supplies of all these things just vanish, and then the whole e-vehicle industry will be hit heavily if we are all dependent only on one particular sector. But Professor Pant, certain sectors like steel are carbon heavy. You were talking already about things like that. They are required for almost everything that a modern economy needs to grow. So do you see alternative environment-friendly building materials developing? What sort of an impact is this going to have on pricing?
You have to do it. You have no option. Really, you have no option to do it. You can't say, I can't do it. You have to do it. For example, you want to export steel to the second largest exporter of steel in the world after China. You want to export steel to the EU. That's a market. They say very simple. You either mitigate your carbon or you pay tax. You decide. Now, the government is rightly saying, let's start mitigation measures inside and figure out how to adjust. Question is to adjust. You can't say we are in a state where we are not going to adjust. Same thing happened in the case of oil. Take oil. Let me give you an example of oil. And people talk about prices. Oil was about $2 a barrel in 1971. It went to $31 a barrel in 1979. The whole West went into inflation. Conservation measures started, alternative methods started, looking for shale oil, etc. In 91, the price of oil fell down, you may not believe it, to $12 a barrel in nominal terms. You adjust. If you take nature as given, you learn to adjust to it. But if you think you can change things so that to make nature adjust to you, you'll fail. And it's happening in India. We are failing too. We are still not getting our cropping pattern right. We have still people talking about agricultural exports. Look at the land-van ratio in India. Can India be a successful agricultural exporter compared to countries like Brazil, then New Zealand, Australia, etc.? No, we're not. Certainly are not going to be a successful agricultural exporter. We just don't have a favorable land-man ratio. And if you push it too far, you'll have exactly the situation we have today.
Okay, we're running short of time because we have other programs scheduled after this. But Mr. Srirangam, maritime transport, it accounts for 80% of world trade by volume. And this sector is reported, to be particularly vulnerable because whatever extreme weather events we see on land, they're probably as bad, if not worse, at sea. So, what's your reading of this sector?
Yes, you see, you have tropical cyclones getting more and more intense, and that is going to be, impacting on the prices that we pay, etc. So all these are emerging challenges. They don't have cut and dry solutions for us. We need to put our heads together. And, we haven't done too much as of now. Already the RBI bulletin of Feb 2024 says, Jan was the hottest in the history of mankind, Jan 2024. We already crossed 1.5 degrees Celsius since the Industrial Revolution broke out.
Right.
So we need to hammer out solutions for all these challenges.
Indeed, Professor Pant, the inflationary impact of climate change, the impacts are likely to be more severe. That's what we've been talking as we go into the future. So as individuals, do you think there should be an approach? I mean, after all, we as greed, we plan for a big house, we plan for a bigger car, we save, all these sort of things. Or should we be looking at mitigation?
See, there is a very well-known proposition in economics. When there is a public good, like climate, then market will not deliver. Market cannot deliver a solution. Only global coordination can, like happened in the case of trade. I believe a similar thing will be coming very soon in the case of climate change. People will figure out that, look, India is a country that is growing fast and needs coal. And what do we do? Because India can screw up the whole global climate. I have a number somewhere. I think a fair amount of global, carbon emissions are going to come from India. What do we do? Someone will find a way of getting around it.
Right.
Only if you agree that it's a global problem.
Sure.
But if you keep finding
I think the world accepts that it's a global problem, but we've run short of time. Mr. Srirangam, the last word to you. Is climate inflation a subject for economists rather than environmentalists, given the kind of debate that we've had?
We can't be sectional anymore, sectarian anymore. There has to be a holistic approach about it. Environmentalists, economists, policymakers, NGOs, they all have to come together. The biggest blunder we have done so far is to bifurcate, trifurcate. We have never approached knowledge and human existential challenges in a holistic manner, unified manner. So again, if we commit the blunder, we won't be there to regret.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Pant and Mr. Srirangam. Thank you for enlightening us on this important subject. Now, evidence seems to suggest that this alarm is real. Now, the impact of climate change on production and supply is real. The predicted scarcity of water on food and other sectors is real. The impact of less energy, since some forms are going to be phased out, that's also real. Urbanization, rate of technological development, political stability and the like, all these things are important. These scenarios are real. The political instability, political stability, all these are important. They provide nation states with the ability to mitigate and adapt. But really it is in the end innovation, as Professor Pant was saying, that will sustain growth and temper inflation. Because at the end of the day, we have to think out something out of the box. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.